Welcome to Blitz Interviews. Like the game of chess, it's only lasts 10 minutes. We're going to talk today with Giora about potentially very confusing term, but very, very important. We're going to talk about API security. Giora, can you please tell me about yourself and what do you do for a living?
Hi, thank you, Evgeny. I'm Giora. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Neosec in the API security space. And previously the inventor of what's known today as XDR and part of Palo Alto Networks.
So here's an interesting topic, because if you ask someone with 25 years of experience what you did for API security 20 years ago, they will say, because it didn't exist. So tell me about APIs. Why is it important? Why pretty much everything right now build an API, and how you define API security?
Yeah, so I think, kind of having the perspective of enterprise security and now the perspective of API security, I think, we were used to the fact that, we used to have data centers and business applications within data centers and corporate networks. And those still exist, but we all know that it's not the future. I mean, the new development and the new applications that are built are typically built in the cloud, in dedicated application environments. And they're also built in a different way. They're built in a way that is kind of exposed to the outside by design, because the new business processes require us to expose different capabilities to the outside, to our clients and partners and different business relationships. So APIs are really the building blocks of the way that we expose all these business services. I mean, we write these applications and we need to expose them somehow as web application or as service-to-service interactions. APIs are really the building blocks that enable those services to be exposed to the outside.
Is there a secure way to access such services because they're outside? And I don't think firewall will help because it's all over HTTPS.
Right. So I think the discussion is no longer on the networking side, right? Because naturally you set up your networking in the right way, and there's of course there are also some pitfalls there. But let's say that you set the right configuration on your cloud account and you do everything right. Now it's a question of how you expose these APIs, and what business logic is exposed, and what is a logical way of using your application, or there are also many risks that relate to that. So typically the layers that people use to deploy these applications, they use some infrastructure controls like cloud security. They use CDNs or DDoS protection. They use WAF as part of the stack. This is pretty standard. And they even use API gateways, which are another layer, another proxy that you deploy that has some specific capabilities for APIs. Typically, it adds authentication, authorization, rate limiting, things that are important also from a security perspective. But the problem is that with all these controls, in the end of the day, there are all these APIs, the specific business logic specific APIs that are exposed to the outside. Most companies don't even have an inventory of these APIs. And this is where the problem starts, because if you don't have an inventory, you don't have a plan on how to protect them, you don't really monitor the behavior over these APIs. So the point is that it's not enough to just focus on the infrastructure. You're actually exposing your core business to the outside. So you need to go one level up and understand what's in that traffic and how to prevent different types of abuse.
In many companies, where they have SDLC, it's good development, they use DAST, dynamic access testing, to actually understand and in some cases map API or your website. Is this similar, or are they a bit different?
So I think that DAST and in general, the security testing or the SDLC process is is one of the controls that people use to write better applications that are more robust from a security perspective. But by itself, it doesn't really monitor what happens in production, because even if you write the perfect APIs, and even if, by the way, even if they don't have any vulnerabilities, in the end of the day, if they're not used correctly by your client or your partner, you still have a problem. You have a business problem. So it's not enough to just see what's happening on the development time. It's also important to understand how they're actually accessed in practice.
Okay, so there's a lot of open banking applications right now. Let's say I have an app to consolidate my banking information or something else. What you're saying is that I probably over API need to connect to different banks or different systems. And while there's no vulnerability, I potentially over API may allow Giora to take Evgeny money or move Evgeny money without Evgeny understanding this?
This is actually a very interesting topic. So I also happen to be the chair of the fraud prevention task force in at the FTX, the Financial Data Exchange. The FTX is basically the organization that standardizes APIs for exactly for this use case, for accessing banking information over APIs in order to allow connecting between accounts and connecting fintech applications into accounts. So this is a topic that every consumer knows about because we use it every day when we use different types of fintech applications, or even when we wire money between bank accounts. I mean, we make that connection. So that is a good example of how APIs come into play, because all these financial institutions need to expose these APIs, which happen to be standardized in a way that enables aggregators to operate on behalf of the end users and enable that type of information exchange, between the financial institutions. So this is an area that financial institutions used to expose mostly web applications and mobile applications that we all use. But over time, there are so many new products and services that they provide that they need to expose many different types of APIs. And one of these use cases is really the ability to link between accounts that is needed in the industry.
Right now, and in the past, we still have the idea of defense in depth of multiple layers of security. So most of the companies, when they have their website, they're going to have DDoS protection, depending on their size. You're going to have some kind of application firewall. You mentioned API gateway. Where's the API security component comes to?
I think you're 100% right. I think there are different layers here that you need to protect for. I mean, there is the infrastructure layer, and there is the volumetric traffic, which is more on the CDN, DDoS side. WAF, which is more about signatures. But then, that authorized traffic, typically doesn't really, benefit a lot from these controls. It kind of goes through by design, and it still needs to be monitored. So API security is really applied on the business logic level in a sense. I mean, it starts from, from that data, from understanding these API calls, and it typically does, three different things. One, maybe the most important place to start is API discovery, is finding the inventory of all the APIs that you're actually exposing. Believe it or not, it turns out that most organizations don't have a good inventory. It sounds simple, but it's actually not simple, right? Because in the end of the day, if you're a big organization, you have so many different applications and developer teams and legacy applications that might not even use like common standards like REST. Can be any standard. It can be SOAP, it can be XML, it can be who knows what. Even getting an inventory of APIs is super hard. So all these APIs are already exposed to the outside. There is a routing from the outside in and authentication schemas and so on that enables these APIs to be used on the outside, but nobody in the organization has a good inventory of where these APIs are.
Without going too much to the product and what you guys do, is this a passive approach or is it scanning to actually map this API? What is the way to do it?
So maybe instead of talking about the product, I'll speak about common problems that we see and maybe we help solve. The first problem is getting the inventory, finding all these shadow APIs, the non-documented APIs, their parameters. I think in order to protect something, you need to be able to see it and have an inventory. So this is one area. Then the second area is finding all these risks and vulnerabilities in the APIs. And the idea there is that if you find these sensitivities or misconfigurations in time, you can actually improve your implementation or deployment of the API so that you don't get into a situation where it's exploited. Then the third component, which is kind of unique to the API security space, is understanding the behavior, the use of these APIs. So even if the APIs are perfect, they can still be abused by the clients. For example, if somebody steals the credentials of one of your customers, they can abuse the access and do something that you didn't intend for. So understanding behavior and abnormal behavior is also super important, and it ties directly to the business process behind these APIs.
Giora, thank you very much. It was a lot of good information in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Evgeny.